Hi guys, my name is Karita. This is my first video around some of the information that has been channeled through to me over the last few years. Now there's going to be two parts of this video. The first part that I'm talking about now is something that came through to me about 5 years ago. And the next part, which I'll include a link in at the comments if you're watching this on YouTube, is something that came through to me about 6 months ago. It's kind of more of a metaphor or an analogy, if you could call it that. But so to get started, what came through to me one time, I was just on a plane going somewhere for work, because at the time I used to travel a lot for work, and this information came through to me from my, I guess, Galactic guardians. I'm very much connected to the Andromedans and the Pleiadians and the Galactic Light Federation. So what they told me at the time was that Earth is very special in terms of the other planets that are in the cosmos. And the reason they gave for that was that we still have a huge level of biodiversity here. Now I thought that was really strange, because I thought, well, aren't they like millions of light years ahead of us in terms of their evolution and all that sort of stuff? And they told me that yes, they are, but they themselves, even though they are so far ahead, they themselves have also gone through all like the historical wars and other intergalactic wars as well, and through that process they've actually lost a lot of their biodiversity, and that's why Earth is still really like a special place in the universe. And it was really interesting, because when they were giving me this information, there was almost like a really sad nostalgia feeling coming through, and I thought that was, I don't know, it just really left me feeling quite sad for them. And I know in some of the meditations I've done over the last 20 odd years and some of the places I've visited, I mean, yes, they're amazing, but there is kind of a strange lack of variety in all these places that I've been to. Like one place that I've been to, all I could see was like plains of grass and the odd tree here and there, and I got the sense that all the civilizations were actually underground. Even though, lovely people, but it's not like here, even with the diversity we have within our own human race, let alone the plant, animal, insect kingdoms. We have such a broad range of things here, and we're really, really lucky that way. And so I was asking them about, well, surely with your advanced technologies and things, you can basically just create stuff. And they said yes, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But they said something is like, basically it's not as good as having nature evolve on its own. There was some sort of difference there, and this is the thing, like they don't give it to me in exact details. It's kind of almost like they're giving me ideas and emotions when they give me information, and then I have to kind of try and translate that into a concept I understand, and then check in with them. It's like, well, is it like this? Is that what you mean? And that's when I then get a confirmation of yes or no. So yeah, it was really interesting, because I was talking to them about their advanced abilities to literally manifest things out of nothing. And yes, they can do that, but it's almost like when you're talking about cloning something, it's never quite as good as the original, if that makes sense. So even though they do have the capacity to literally make things out of nothing, and their technology is amazing, there's something about the genetic diversity or the variety that comes from allowing nature to take its course and things to evolve in their own way. Like the variety that comes through that is something that is apparently really, really rare, and that's something that they've lost. So it's almost like a case of, you could have all the manifesting abilities in the world, or all the magic powers in the world, but it's still only as good as your imagination. And what do you do if you have a bad imagination? There's only so many things you're going to think of to make. So it's kind of like that sort of sense, where Mother Nature, being allowed to left to its own devices, has created this amazing variety here on Earth, and that's why Earth is really, really special. And so they've actually been coming here for many, many hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions. And yeah, part of the attractiveness of that situation means that not only have we had kind of good beings visiting us, but we've had some of the bad beings visiting us as well. And okay, I have to break off here for a little bit of a sojourn onto other topics. So good and bad is all very subjective, and this the sensation or the information I was getting was that it's it's not about seeing the others as bad and certain groups as good, certain groups as bad. It's more about understanding that there's just, things are just the way they are. It's kind of like, cancer cells. Cancer cells are trying to grow because it's like a living organism. It just wants to grow and feed and live and thrive on its own. It's just unfortunate that it actually kills its host. It's a bit like, some people could say that humanity is a bit of a plague or a cancer on the planet. We're not here maliciously trying to kill the planet, but we're just kind of going about doing our own things, and we are inadvertently harming the planet. So it's kind of like that, good and bad are very subjective topics. So that was something they were also telling me about. It's been a very attractive place to come to for all kind of species, and depending on kind of what their, I guess, agenda is and that sort of stuff, it's, varied about what's happened here. Now, one of the things they were telling me too about how they have been visiting us for hundreds of thousands of years, because it's actually been kind of a nice place to, take your kids to a bit of a, I guess, a Disneyland kind of a situation for a lot of groups. So it'd become like, oh, let's go check out this place. That this is how things used to be on our planet as well. Even though there were actually groups here that have been living here as well for God knows how long. Now, one of the things with that is they used to visit us a lot more than what they have been doing, say, in the last few thousand years, like hundreds of thousands of years. They used to be here a lot. But then over the last sort of couple of, say, 10,000, 20,000 years, it's been a lot less by comparison. And they were trying to kind of, now I'm still not 100% sure on this, but they kind of gave me the sense of around 20, 30,000 years ago, things started to kind of die off, and that's when they started interfering with people. There was something there around how it was almost like there was an arrangement or an agreement with someone that they, after a certain period of time, they wouldn't interfere as much. So these beings who, to me, are part of the Galactic Light Federation, kind of interfered with humanity at the time in two ways. It sort of took part over two phases. So first phase was, I think, around 30,000 years ago, and they kind of interfered with us in a genetic kind of way, maybe putting in genetic markers or sort of like a sleeping things in our system that would then carry on throughout the generations. And they also, then the second phase of that, which was a few thousand years later, I'm getting kind of the sense of around maybe 25,000 or just years ago, something like that. They sort of sent in a few, basically deep undercover agents, for lack of a better word. And they were giving me this idea that they're kind of like like for some of you might know the term starseeds. So these guys were the very, very early starseeds, and there was this understanding that they would come here because the Earth was somehow moving into a phase of its life that meant that they couldn't really interfere as much as what they'd been doing, or they couldn't come and visit us as much as they had been. And so they were kind of sending in some operatives to kind of try and help humanity along over the next however many thousands of years. And it's been interesting because I recently came across a post around this group called the Archons, which I've never heard of before until last week. And they were talking about how there's, like, the Archons, I got the sense were actually kind of the baddies, and they had, over the last 20-odd thousand years, put like a force field or a cloud over the planet so that we couldn't evolve, and so we were kind of trapped in this cycle, which is interesting because it actually matches up with the information I was given about 5 years ago, but it was more from the context of around the planet was moving into a different kind of era or a phase of its cycle, almost as well a reflection of it's moving into a different part of space, and there's something in that part of space that makes it harder for us to kind of get to you, to kind of make sure you're okay and look out for you. So that's why they were kind of started doing like a bit of genetic interference and sending in these deep undercover operatives to kind of give us a chance to make it through. And it's funny then, because I also read a couple months ago now that there's this 26,000 year loop cycle that the Earth goes through, and I think it's to do with, so not only do we have our solar system, what do you call it, orbit, but then also the solar system's placed within our bigger galaxy. It's that orbit, I believe, that takes 26,000 years to go around, and I think that's kind of where we're coming to. And it's something to do with, as we're coming out of that sort of cycle, there's like this magnetic fog that is basically lifting, and that's kind of triggering off. Then a lot of people are waking up because the kind of the veil is now thinning, and it's, yeah, just like a lot of people are now coming online, waking up, becoming more spiritual. There's an increase in frequency of the planet. All sorts of things are happening, and the information that I was given, it's something to do with that sort of cycle, and it's happened many, many times before. Now, this whole thing about this massive cycle and this magnetic fog, it does match up to a lot was being spoken about in this article I read about the archons, and they were talking about more, it's like a force field that's being put on us on purpose, which I thought was very interesting. I still have to research more into that. I don't know very much about that at all. So if anyone out there knows more about it and you've got a link to an article, I'd love to read it, put it in the comments, and I'll check it out. But this analogy and metaphor that I also got like 6 months ago, it kind of relates to all that, and that will be what my next video is about. It kind of explains it more in terms of just a story, I guess, which makes it sometimes easy to understand when big things are happening to us, which they currently are on the planet. So going back to the interference that they did with us many, tens of thousands of years ago, they were explaining it to me. It was like a boost to give us half a chance of when the time arrived, that we would have the ability to make the right decisions, and we would have half a chance of kind of making the right choice, so that we could move into the light or ascend to join the galactic community. I thought that was really interesting, and that's why they did the genetic tweaking or something. I can't even begin to describe it, because it wasn't like a modification to the DNA. It was somehow, it was a tweak, and the only way I can think to describe it is we had something before, and they kind of put it in pause to protect us, and so that then it would come online at the right time. It's something like that, and that by being in pause mode, it actually protected us as a species from whatever was kind of happening. And it's kind of like this thing that was always there and just kind of being put to hibernation. And now I think that's what's sort of being reactivated in a lot of people, which is explaining why so many people are now sort of interested in, alternative therapies and spirituality and things like that. So yeah, I find that's very, very interesting. But the other part of it was these kind of deep undercover star seeds, so to speak. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, star seed is kind of like a person who has a past background or a soul history that comes from another galaxy. And the way that my guides were explaining it to me, with this kind of deep undercover people that were planted here hundreds, like tens of thousands of years ago as well, is that they are people who have agreed to come here to help humanity and to kind of get stuck in those karmic loops. Because that's the thing, like when you're existing here on this 3D plane, you are kind of stuck in karmic cycles and loops and playing out like lessons that your soul has to learn and things like that. So the beings that chose to come here to play that role, they knew what they were getting into, and they knew about the times that we're sort of coming into now, and that's why they chose to be here then. And it's they're usually the troublemakers throughout history. They've been persecuted. They're the people who've basically run out of town, burnt at the stakes, crucified. You name it. They're the people that were the ones that got into trouble, and they were kind of like the few that were sent here to kind of help humanity along at different important stages in life. But it was also the people who were just here just to kind of calm the situation as well within their own little communities throughout history. So I think there's been a lot of people here have just been kind of like, I don't know, laying low in some instances and doing their thing, and also other people who are, sticking their neck out every so often and getting it cut off, unfortunately. But hopefully nowadays that sort of situation doesn't happen as much. So people are coming out a bit more confidently, letting go of all that past life trauma, and are finally kind of here to take the world to the next level. Something else I wanted to talk to you guys about is something that was shown to me in a meditation just last week. And in that, I saw all these kind of negative energies leaving the planet. And they were telling me how it's nothing for us to be really worried about and focused on. It's just there's stuff that's going on right now, and there's a lot of energies that are leaving the planet because this fog is lifting, so more people are waking up, more people are sort of increasing their vibration, and in doing so, like the planet is like, it's a 2-for-1, it's almost like the planet shifts up, so we shift up, and we shift up, so the planet lifts up, and by doing that, we're slowly sort of increasing the frequency of the planet, and that is also then driving off a lot of these older energies that have been here for, I reckon, the last 26,000 years, that have contributed to a lot of just keeping humanity repressed and down. So it's a very interesting thing. Like, yeah, it's interesting because in the meditation, I was on one side of the planet. I just saw these energies leaving on the other side of the planet, and they were saying, oh, you don't have to worry about who and what they are. You just have to know that they're going. Like, okay. I just thought, I felt that I had to share that with you guys because I'm getting a bit of a spiritual mental slap. It's like, it's important to tell them. It's like, okay. Okay, and that does actually relate to my question to my guides, or the Galactic Federation, around, you know, so you've got all this technology and you've basically got the ability to create things out of nothing. So why did you come here? And they're explaining to me that, you know, yes, they do have the ability to create things, and the way they were sort of explaining it, so what they do is, if you think of say like a crystal, so I've got one here. So if you think of like a crystal, which is a solid, you know, object, and they were trying to explain it to me that the way they go about making things is they harness like a harmonic or a frequency in some way, and they were explaining it to me. So they basically said, if you imagine a crystal and you melt the crystal down, and then you capture the sound waves of that liquid. So if, I don't know if liquid crystals display kind of things are literally liquid crystal, but yeah, they were saying like, yeah, you capture the sound or the frequency of a melted crystal, and they used that then as a way to build things. Now, I don't understand the science at all, and I feel this is like, yeah, it's way beyond my capability to understand. So, you know, they probably dumbed it down really basically so that I could even have a hope in understanding it. But it's something to do with they harness harmonics and frequencies, and then they manipulate that to create solid objects or living objects. And the thing is, everything that they create is alive. Like everything that is created from these frequencies is a living being. They're just different types of sentient beings, I guess. So like in that sense, like a crystal is also a sentient being. And plants are, you know, obviously animals, us, them, but also like planets as well. Planets are sentient beings, and it ties into then like their spaceships as well, which are somehow living organisms as well. Now I know, like just at a very basic science level, so even crystals are made from silica, and I believe silica is the core component to any living being here on Earth anyway. And so that's why I like to think of crystals as living objects. So they just happen to live at a very, very slow rate compared to us. But then you've got other little insects and things that, you know, their whole life cycles take a month. Whereas these guys, I think these are still quite very much alive, but their life cycles are thousands of years in span. And so for me, then that means that our planet is a living sentient being. And that then relates to the information they were giving me, because they were showing me how at the moment, you know, I was talking about how people and the planet are kind of increasing in frequency and vibration. They were showing me that part of that is also there is this harmonic or a frequency that is, and I don't know if they're pumping it into the planet, or it's somehow the planet itself is absorbing it, because we are now moving through an area of space where there is less magnetic cloud, so it can actually finally breathe almost. It's like this energy exists everywhere, and the planet is now finally able to suck in all this energy that it's been sort of dying to do for the last 10, 20,000 years. And they were showing me how this energy is coming into the core of the planet, and they were showing me how it's like flooding through all these, like the veins within the planet. I mean, I don't know it's the same thing, but there's these like ley lines that crisscross the planet. Quite often they refer to also there's crystal ley lines. I don't know if that's what they were referring to, but it was literally, they were showing me like this energy is kind of pumping through the blood vessels of the planet, and there's more of it going, and it's increasing in the frequency of, I guess, the pumps. So it's like your heartbeat is increasing. And this is what I was asking them, so, well, is that what the Schumann resonance is? Because the Schumann resonance is quite often called, you know, it's the frequency or the heartbeat of the planet. And typically it's at 7.83 hertz. Lately it's been spiking, going all over the place, really crazy. So if you've been feeling a bit unwell, randomly, out of nowhere for like a day or even a couple of hours, then it goes, odds are it's the Schumann resonance is just like going whoosh, whoosh. But yeah, so in terms of this frequency thing that is flooding the planet, they were telling me it's not quite the Schumann resonance. They were sort of explaining the Schumann resonance is only just scratching the surface. They were kind of showing me this iceberg, and the Schumann resonance kind of explains the little bit that's seen above the water. And we have no idea yet about this, you know, 90% that's under the water. So I don't really fully understand what that is all about, but they were just showing me how that is the energy that's kind of what's increasing the vibration of the planet. And because we all live on the planet, so it's affecting us as well. It's affecting all the animals, everything. Now, the whole concept of the frequencies that I was telling you about, how they make things out of like a harmonics or a frequency, that sort of doesn't quite make sense. Don't worry, I'm in the same boat, but I do understand it from the perspective of, so I know our scientists are now finding that when you can, say, match a frequency or a sound wave to the same kind of, I don't know, measurements, I don't fully understand it, like as an object, you can actually break that object, which is kind of how then you see opera singers can smash glass, or you'll get a particular bridge that breaks down just because there's this like a harmonic that's created by the wind blowing through the supporting beams and things. So scientists are just discovering that and figuring out how they can use sound frequency to destroy cancer cells and all sorts of things. So it's works somehow on the similar lines. So we're figuring it out in terms of how we can use sound waves to break things apart, but they use it to kind of put things together, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So now to finish off this video, I was asking, so, well, why is it that I need to get this message out to everyone? You know, what is it that you need us to do? How can we help? That sort of stuff. And they were explaining to me how there is a process happening at the moment of two becoming one, and then we're going to move forward as one. Now, the way they showed it to me was like there's an inner earth coming up to meet the outer earth, and then that will kind of merge to create a new earth, and then together all of that will move forward into the future, I guess. I don't know. But there was something around like two becoming one, and then together we will all move forward. And I think that's also relates to then the duality or the us and them mentality. It's the male, masculine, issue. It's all around that wherever there's like very much a separation before of anything, it's kind of like merging into one, and then together we will all move forward. And I can see it happening. You know, there's like a beautiful time now because everyone's kind of stuck inside, but it's starting to be, you know, wars are stopping because it's not about us and them anymore. It's like, hey, we've got a common enemy. Let's get together and move forward as one. You know, it's that sort of stuff that's happening. And it will happen in terms of the masculine and feminine energies as well. And yeah, all sorts of aspects. So that should be really interesting to see how that plays out in the coming years ahead of us. Because that's the thing, like all of this stuff isn't going to happen overnight or in a couple of months. I think this is the start of a long process, say like probably, you know, 5-10 years at least. And the other thing they were telling me was that we have to remember to stay within like a good place. So come at this from a loving and compassionate place. Don't buy into the fear. Don't buy into the conspiracy theories around, it's like, you know, blaming different groups of people. You know, things happen for a reason. It's happened, you know, can't take it back now. And now it's just a case of making the most of it, because you can always think of it as a test for humanity. Like, are you going to then move forward with compassion, or are you going to drop into fear and hate and blame your neighbor, basically? And the biggest thing that they told me was, and it kind of relates to the whole concept at the beginning where, you know, Earth is such a special place in the cosmos because of its diversity. You know, Earth doesn't need humans. That's the thing, like, we are so wrapped up in our own superiority and magnificence and, you know, all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, she doesn't need us. Gaia does not need people. We need her. And we need to start thinking about her as a sentient being, looking at all the stuff we're doing to her, you know, raping the lands and pillaging, you know, the minerals out of it. There needs to be a different way. There needs to be a better way forward. And that's something I think the challenge for generations to come is, how can we use this time now to start to make those shifts? Because, yeah, she doesn't need us. End of the day, she does not need us, but we need her. Anyway, so I hope that's been useful for you guys. I just felt the need, I actually got told to make sure I get that message out there, so I don't know who it's meant to reach, but I trust that it's reaching whoever it's meant to reach, either today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, I don't know. But if that's been useful, give it a like or subscribe to my channel. I'm hoping to do more of these sorts of videos in the future. And yeah, I'll include a link in the description if you're watching this on YouTube to the second part of this video, which is the analogy and a metaphor that was given to me about 6 months ago. Okay, bye.